The funny thing about losing your family is that sometimes they don't even realize they've lost you until years later. My parents certainly didn't. The night they finally understood what they'd done, I was standing on a stage, accepting an award for building a company that had just been valued at 8 figures. Cameras flashed, business leaders shook my hand, reporters wanted interviews, and sitting 3 rows back were the people who once canceled my graduation party because my younger sister wanted attention. They weren't invited. They had somehow gotten tickets through a mutual acquaintance. I remember looking out into the audience and seeing my mother crying. Not proud tears, regret. The kind of tears that come when someone finally understands that consequences don't always arrive immediately. Sometimes they take years. Sometimes they arrive after the person you've taken for granted has already built an entire life without you. By that point, I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost 4 years, and honestly, the silence had been peaceful. But to understand how we got there, I have to take you back to my graduation. Back to the day I finally realized I was never going to be the priority in my own family. My name is Ethan. I'm 24 years old now, and growing up, I was what most families call the easy child. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I never got arrested, suspended, or called home by teachers. If something needed to be done, I did it. If someone needed help, I helped. Meanwhile, my younger sister Lily was the exact opposite. She lived for attention. Every event had to be about her. Every conversation had to circle back to her. Every accomplishment anyone else achieved somehow became her story, and my parents enabled it constantly. At first, I thought it was normal. Every family has favorites, even if they don't admit it. But as I got older, the pattern became impossible to ignore. When I made honor roll, my parents congratulated me for about 30 seconds before asking if I could help Lily study. When I got accepted into advanced classes, dinner somehow became a discussion about how hard school was for Lily. When I earned a scholarship, my parents spent the evening comforting Lily because she felt insecure. Everything always came back to her. I learned not to expect much. The less you expect, the less disappointed you become. At least that's what I told myself. By senior year of high school, I was carrying a 3.9 GPA. I worked part-time. I had earned several academic awards, and I'd been accepted into one of the best universities in the state. It wasn't perfect, but I was proud of myself. More importantly, I had earned enough scholarships to avoid drowning in student loans. For the first time in my life, I felt like all my hard work had actually meant something. My parents seemed excited too, or at least they acted excited. My mother immediately started talking about a graduation party. A big one, family, friends, neighbors, relatives, the whole thing. For weeks, she planned every detail. She booked a venue, ordered decorations, invited dozens of people. My father kept talking about how proud he was. Looking back now, I realize most of that excitement wasn't actually about me. It was about appearances. They loved looking like supportive parents. They loved receiving compliments. They loved being associated with success. Actually supporting me was a different matter. But 18-year-old Ethan didn't understand that yet. I was just happy. For once, it felt like I was getting a moment that belonged to me. A single day, a few hours, one celebration, that was all. Then Lily decided she couldn't handle it. 2 weeks before graduation, she came home furious after losing a local dance competition. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. But the way my parents reacted immediately made me nervous. The entire household shifted. Suddenly, everyone was walking on eggshells around her. My mother spent hours comforting her. My father bought her gifts. They kept talking about how devastated she was, how embarrassed she felt, how difficult this was for her. I remember sitting at the kitchen table listening to all of it. Something felt familiar, and not in a good way, because every time Lily had a crisis, everyone else's life stopped. Every achievement, every celebration, every milestone. Everything got pushed aside until she felt better. A week before graduation, I walked into the living room and found my parents having a serious conversation. The second they saw me, they went quiet. That should have been my warning. But I had no idea that within 24 hours, they were going to make a decision that would permanently change our relationship. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to accept it. The next afternoon, my parents called me into the living room. The second I saw their faces, I knew something was wrong. My father was sitting in his usual chair, arms crossed. My mother was perched on the edge of the couch, avoiding eye contact. Lily wasn't there, but somehow I could already tell she was the reason for whatever conversation was about to happen. "Sit down," my father said. I sat. My stomach tightened. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my mother cleared her throat. "We've been thinking about the graduation party." The way she said it immediately made my chest sink. Not because of the words, because of the tone. People don't use that tone when they're about to deliver good news. "What about it?" I asked. My mother exchanged a glance with my father. "We think it might be best to postpone it." I blinked. "Postpone it? Just temporarily?" I stared at her. My graduation was in 6 days. The venue was booked. The invitations had been sent. Relatives were already making travel arrangements. How exactly do you postpone a graduation party after graduation? Why? I asked. Neither of them answered immediately, and that silence told me everything. Lily, my mother sighed. Ethan, no, just answer the question. Is this because of Lily? My father shifted uncomfortably. Your sister is having a difficult time right now. There it was, of course, always Lily. I laughed, not because anything was funny, because it was absurd. You're canceling my graduation party because Lily lost a dance competition. It's not that simple. It sounds that simple. My mother's expression hardened slightly. Your sister is struggling emotionally. And she feels like everyone is focusing on you. I genuinely thought I had misheard her. Everyone was focusing on me, for the first time in 18 years, for 1 week, one event, one accomplishment, and somehow that was unfair. I looked between both of my parents, waiting for one of them to realize how ridiculous this sounded. Neither did. My father leaned forward. We're trying to do what's best for the family. The family. That phrase had become code for something over the years. It never meant everyone. It meant Lily. Whatever benefited her automatically became what was best for the family. What's best for Lily, I corrected. Nobody argued, because they knew I was right. My mother finally looked at me. She's fragile right now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had spent 4 years working toward graduation. 4 years studying, working part-time, maintaining grades, applying for scholarships, sacrificing weekends, missing parties, doing everything right. And somehow all of that was worth less than Lily having a bad month. What about me? I asked quietly. The room went silent. My mother frowned. What do you mean? The fact that she had to ask hurt more than the cancellation itself. What about me? I repeated. Do my feelings matter at all? Neither of them answered, because the truth was obvious. Not really, not compared to Lily's, not ever. My father rubbed his forehead. You're making this harder than it needs to be. That almost made me laugh again. Harder than it needed to be. As if I was the problem. As if wanting my graduation party wasn't a reasonable expectation. As if I was being selfish for wanting one day to celebrate my accomplishments. My mother tried a different approach. We can have another party later. When? A few months, maybe after things settle down. Things, not Lily, things. They wouldn't even say it out loud anymore. Everything revolved around her so completely that they acted like her emotions were some natural force of nature. Like rain or gravity, something everyone else simply had to accommodate. I stood up. I'm not postponing it. My father's expression darkened. Excuse me, I'm not postponing my graduation. The graduation isn't being postponed. The celebration is. Same difference. No, it isn't. I looked at both of them. For years, I had been the understanding son. The mature son, the patient son, the son who compromised, the son who adjusted, the son who accepted disappointment quietly so nobody else felt uncomfortable. And suddenly I was exhausted. I didn't want to be understanding anymore. I didn't want to be mature anymore. I didn't want to spend my life sacrificing things for people who would never do the same for me. My father stood. The decision has already been made. There it was, the final verdict, no discussion, no compromise, no consideration, just a ruling handed down from above. My graduation party was canceled. Case closed. I nodded slowly. Then I asked the question that changed everything. Did you even ask me before making the decision? Neither answered, because they hadn't. Of course they hadn't. Why would they? I was expected to accept whatever happened, just like always. My mother reached for my arm. Ethan, please understand. I stepped back. No. The word surprised all three of us, including me, because it was the first time I'd ever said it. A real no, not a reluctant agreement. Not a quiet surrender, a boundary, a refusal. No. The room felt different after that, like something had cracked. My father stared at me. What exactly are you planning to do? I looked him directly in the eyes. And for the first time in my life, I answered honestly. I'm going to celebrate my graduation. My father scoffed. With who? The question was meant as an insult, a reminder that they controlled everything, the venue, the invitations, the family, the guest list, but they forgot something. The people attending weren't showing up because of them. They were showing up because of me, my friends, my classmates, my teachers, the people who had actually supported me, people who cared, people who knew how hard I had worked, people who weren't measuring my accomplishments against Lily's feelings. I smiled, and for some reason that smile seemed to make my parents nervous. Don't worry about it, I said. Then I walked upstairs. For the rest of the evening, my phone barely left my hand. Text messages, calls, emails, plans, because if my family wasn't going to celebrate me, I was going to celebrate myself. And by the end of that night, I had accidentally started something much bigger than a graduation party. I had started building a life that didn't need my parents' approval. And none of us understood yet how permanent that decision was going to become. The morning after my parents canceled my graduation party, I woke up feeling strangely calm. Not happy, not excited, just calm. Like a decision had finally been made somewhere deep inside me. For years, I had spent my life trying to earn approval from people who were determined to give it to someone else. And for the first time, I wasn't going to fight for it. If my parents didn't want to celebrate me, fine. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. And I definitely wasn't going to spend my graduation weekend sitting at home pretending everything was okay while everyone tiptoed around Lily's feelings. Instead, I started making phone calls. The first person I called was my best friend, Marcus. When I explained what happened, there was a long silence. Then he said something that changed everything. "Why don't we just throw our own party?" I laughed. "My parents already canceled everything. So the venue is gone. We'll find another one. The invitations, we'll send new ones. The food, we'll order food." I remember sitting there quietly, because he was treating the problem like it was solvable. Meanwhile, I had spent the entire night acting like the cancellation was some unavoidable tragedy. Marcus didn't see it that way. To him, it was simple. My parents canceled their party. That didn't mean my graduation was canceled. Within an hour, Marcus had recruited half our friend group. By lunchtime, people were texting me ideas. By dinner, we had a plan. One of our classmates had parents who owned a large property outside town. A huge backyard, a covered patio, enough space for dozens of people. When they heard what happened, they offered it immediately. For free. That part stuck with me. People who weren't even related to me were willing to support me without hesitation. Meanwhile, my own family couldn't spare a single evening. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Over the next few days, something incredible happened. Everyone showed up. Friends volunteered to help decorate. Teachers sent congratulations. Former classmates reached out. Even neighbors who had known me for years offered support. Apparently, my parents weren't the only ones who had sent invitations. Word spread quickly about why the original party had been canceled, and people were angry, not at me, at them. The more people learned the truth, the more ridiculous it sounded. "Wait," one teacher said. "They canceled your graduation party because your sister lost a competition?" Even saying it out loud sounded absurd. But yes, that was exactly what happened. Graduation day finally arrived. I walked across the stage, accepted my diploma, shook hands, took photos, and honestly, it was one of the happiest days of my life, not because of the diploma. Because I stopped looking toward the audience expecting something from my parents. They were there. Of course they were. But even while I was graduating, their attention kept drifting toward Lily. Checking on her, talking to her, making sure she felt included. I noticed. For the first time, I just didn't care. That evening, I drove to the property where our replacement celebration was being held, and the second I arrived, I nearly cried. Cars filled the driveway. Music played from speakers. Decorations covered the yard. People laughed and talked everywhere. Someone had even recreated parts of the original graduation theme using pictures from social media. I stood there staring, because these people had done all of this voluntarily. Nobody was obligated. Nobody had to. They simply wanted to celebrate me. For the first time in my life, I understood what support actually felt like. Not guilt. Not obligation. Support. Marcus walked over carrying a drink. "Told you we'd figure it out." I laughed. Then I looked around again. There were more people there than had been invited to my parents' original party. Friends, teachers, neighbors, classmates, even a few relatives. Apparently some family members had learned what happened and decided they'd rather attend my celebration instead. That part caused problems. Huge problems, because my parents found out. I was standing near the food tables when my phone started vibrating. Mom, ignored. A minute later, Dad, ignored. Then another call, and another, and another. Finally, a text arrived. "Where are you?" I stared at it, then put my phone away. 5 minutes later, Marcus walked over trying not to laugh. "You might want to see this." He handed me his phone, social media, photos, videos, posts from guests, pictures from the celebration. And apparently dozens of people were sharing them, which meant my parents were seeing everything in real time. The party, the guests, the decorations, the smiles, all the things they had tried to take away. My mother called again. This time I answered. "Ethan, what is this?" I looked around at everyone enjoying themselves. "It's my graduation party. You told people we canceled yours. You did cancel it." "That wasn't the point." I nearly laughed. Of course that wasn't the point. The point was embarrassment. People were finding out. People were judging. People were asking questions, and for once my parents couldn't control the narrative. My father got on the phone. "You've made us look terrible." There it was. Not an apology, not concern, not regret. Reputation, that was what mattered. "You handled that yourselves." The silence on the other end was immediate. Then my father said something I would never forget. "After everything we've done for you." For years that phrase worked. It made me feel guilty, made me feel selfish, made me question myself. This time it didn't, because suddenly I realized something. Parents don't earn loyalty by doing the bare minimum. They earn loyalty by showing up, by caring, by supporting their children. And in that moment, I honestly couldn't remember the last time they'd chosen me over Lily. "I have to go," I said, then I hung up. And for the rest of the night, I didn't think about them once. I laughed, took pictures, shared stories, celebrated with people who genuinely wanted me there. Around midnight, everyone gathered for a toast. Marcus raised his glass. I want to congratulate the guy who worked harder than anyone I know." Everyone cheered. Then he added something that made the entire crowd go quiet. "Here's to never letting other people decide how much you're worth." That hit me harder than any graduation speech, because that was exactly what I'd been doing my entire life. Letting my parents decide my value. Letting Lily decide my place. Letting everyone else determine whether I deserved recognition. And standing there surrounded by people who believed in me, I made a promise to myself. This would be the last time. If my family couldn't appreciate me, I'd build a future without needing their approval. At 18 years old, I thought that promise was about a graduation party. What I didn't know yet was that it was actually the first step toward walking away from them completely. And once I started moving forward, I was never going back. The summer after graduation was awkward, not explosive. Not dramatic, just awkward. My parents acted as if the graduation party incident should have blown over within a few days. They never apologized, and I never brought it up again. That was becoming a pattern. Whenever they hurt me, they expected me to get over it without them acknowledging what happened. The difference this time was that something inside me had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed. And disappointment has a way of lasting much longer than anger. A few weeks later, I moved into my college dorm. My university was about 4 hours away from home, which felt perfect, far enough to have space, close enough that nobody could accuse me of running away. When my parents dropped me off, my mother cried. My father gave me a quick hug. Lily spent most of the trip talking about herself, just like always. As I unpacked my things, my mother kept saying how much she would miss me. The strange thing was that I didn't feel much sadness. Not because I hated them, because for the first time in my life I felt free. I wasn't living in a house where every accomplishment was compared to someone else's feelings. I wasn't expected to constantly make sacrifices. I wasn't responsible for keeping the peace anymore. I could just focus on myself. And honestly, that was a new experience. College wasn't easy. My scholarship covered most expenses, but not everything. I worked part-time during my first year, then 2 part-time jobs during my second. Some weeks were exhausting. Classes during the day, work at night, assignments after midnight. But I loved it. Every hour I invested felt like an investment in my future. Meanwhile, calls from home became less frequent. Not because I refused to talk, because nobody seemed particularly interested. Most conversations followed the same pattern. My mother would call, ask how I was doing, then spend 20 minutes talking about Lily, her latest competition, her latest relationship, her latest problem, her latest crisis. Sometimes I felt like a guest listening to a podcast about my sister. If I mentioned a good grade or achievement, the topic quickly changed. It stopped bothering me. I had friends, professors who believed in me, mentors who encouraged me. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who saw me as more than Lily's brother. During my second year, I discovered something unexpected. I enjoyed business a lot. I started helping a small local company improve their online marketing as part of a student project. The results were surprisingly good. Then another business asked for help. Then another. Soon I was earning decent money as a freelance consultant. Nothing life-changing, but enough to make me realize there might be opportunities I had never considered. When I told my parents, their reaction was underwhelming. "That's nice," my mother said. Then she immediately started discussing Lily's latest breakup. I remember staring at the phone, not hurt, just tired. It felt like talking to people who had already decided who you were years ago. No matter what you accomplished, their opinion never changed. The real turning point came during my third year. Lily got engaged. The announcement was treated like a royal wedding. Family group chats exploded. Relatives called. Plans were made. Celebrations were organized. My parents spent months talking about nothing else. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then my mother called. "We need a favor." Whenever my parents started a conversation with those words, it was never good. "What kind of favor?" "Your father and I are helping pay for the wedding." "Okay, we're a little short." I already knew where this was going. "Ethan." There it was, my scholarship savings, my business income, the money I had spent years building. They wanted access to it. Not for an emergency. Not for medical bills. Not because they were struggling. For Lily's wedding. The same Lily whose feelings had been more important than my graduation. The same Lily who had never once supported me. The same Lily who rarely even asked how I was doing. My mother kept talking. "Family helps family. It's only temporary. We'll pay you back." The usual phrases. I listened quietly. Then I said something she clearly wasn't expecting. "No." Silence. "What?" "I'm not paying for Lily's wedding." My mother sounded shocked, as if the possibility had never occurred to her. "Ethan, she's your sister." "Exactly." The silence grew heavier. Then my father got on the phone. His tone was less emotional, more direct. "This is important." I couldn't help laughing. My graduation had been important too. Apparently not important enough. "No." That single word ended the conversation. For the next few weeks, I received texts from relatives, some supportive, some critical. A few accused me of being selfish. Interestingly, none of those people volunteered their own money, only mine. Eventually, the pressure stopped. The wedding happened. Life moved on, and for the first time, I noticed something strange. The less I gave my family, the less they contacted me. At first, that realization hurt. Then it became liberating because it forced me to ask a difficult question. If people only reach out when they need something, do they actually miss you? Or do they just miss what you provide? The answer wasn't pleasant, but it was honest. By the time I graduated from college, I had built a small consulting business. Nothing huge, just enough clients to support myself, enough momentum to believe I could turn it into something bigger. When my graduation ceremony approached, my mother called. "We're coming this time." This time. Those two words told me everything. Even she knew what happened during high school graduation had never really been forgotten. I thanked her politely, but emotionally things had already changed. They attended, took photos, posted them online, acted like supportive parents. The difference was that I no longer needed it. Their approval wasn't fuel anymore, it was background noise. After graduation, I moved to a new city and focused entirely on growing my business. I thought distance would finally solve everything. What I didn't know was that success was about to create a completely different problem. Because the moment my business started becoming genuinely successful, my parents suddenly became very interested in my life again. And this time they weren't calling to talk about Lily. They were calling because they wanted something from me. Again. The first 2 years after college were some of the hardest years of my life. When people hear about a successful business, they usually imagine the exciting parts. The growth, the money, the recognition. What they don't see are the nights spent staring at a laptop at 3 in the morning wondering if everything is about to fall apart. That's what my life looked like. I rented a tiny apartment, worked ridiculous hours, handled everything myself. Sales, marketing, customer support, accounting, every mistake was mine, every success was mine too. There were months when I questioned whether I was making a terrible decision. Some clients disappeared without paying. Projects failed. Plans didn't work. But every setback taught me something. Most importantly, I wasn't doing it to prove anything anymore. Not to my parents, not to Lily, not to anyone. I was building a life that belonged to me, and somehow that made the difficult days easier. By my 23rd birthday, things started changing. A few major clients signed long-term contracts. Revenue increased. Then doubled again. I hired my first employee, then a second, then a team. For the first time, my business wasn't just surviving, it was growing. Fast. Ironically, that was when my family suddenly became interested in my life. At first, it was subtle. My mother started calling more often. My father began asking questions about work. Relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly started sending friendly messages. It felt strange, not because they were contacting me, because they were contacting me for reasons that felt painfully obvious. The graduation party, the scholarship, the wedding money, none of those things had made me important. Success had. One evening I was scrolling through social media when I nearly laughed out loud. My mother had posted a long message about how proud she was of her son's accomplishments. There were pictures of me, stories about my work ethic, comments from friends praising her parenting. The problem? Most of those stories involved moments when she hadn't actually supported me. She was rewriting history, and apparently she wasn't the only one. A few weeks later, I attended a family gathering. One of my cousins was getting married. I almost didn't go, but enough relatives convinced me to attend that I finally agreed. The second I walked into the venue, I understood why everyone wanted me there. People suddenly cared. A lot. Relatives who had ignored me for years greeted me enthusiastically. Aunts hugged me. Uncles asked about business. Cousins wanted advice. It felt less like a family reunion and more like a networking event. Then Lily arrived. I hadn't seen her in months, maybe longer. She looked surprised to see me, not happy, surprised. As though she genuinely hadn't expected me to show up. We exchanged polite greetings, nothing more. Years earlier, that would have bothered me. Now it felt normal. The truth was that Lily and I had never been particularly close. My parents spent so much time protecting her from consequences that she never learned how relationships actually worked. People eventually get tired of one-sided effort, including siblings. Later that evening, I overheard a conversation that explained everything. A relative I barely knew was talking to my mother. "You must be proud." "I am," my mother replied. "He gets his business skills from his father." I nearly choked on my drink. My father had spent years telling me entrepreneurship was risky, years encouraging me to pursue safer careers, years dismissing my business plans. Now apparently my success came from him. Interesting, the conversation continued. "We always knew he'd do something special." That one almost made me laugh. Always knew, really. Because nobody seemed particularly interested when I was working 80-hour weeks trying to keep my company alive. Nobody seemed interested when I was sleeping 4 hours a night. Nobody seemed interested when I was struggling. Funny how confidence appears after success becomes visible. For the rest of the evening, I noticed similar comments. My parents presenting themselves as key figures in my journey, relatives congratulating them, people assuming they had played a major role. And honestly, I didn't even argue. The people who mattered already knew the truth. My mentors knew, my friends knew, I knew. That was enough. The real problem arrived a month later. My father called unexpectedly. His tone was unusually serious. "We need to talk." Those words never lead anywhere good. About an hour later, I learned why. Lily's husband had started a business. Unfortunately, it wasn't doing well. Actually, it was doing terribly. Debt was piling up. Bills were overdue. Investors were leaving. The situation was becoming desperate, and apparently my parents had a solution, me. At first, they framed it as advice. Could I meet with him? Review the business, offer suggestions. I agreed. That seemed reasonable. Then the real request appeared. Would I consider investing? There it was, the actual reason for the phone call. Not support, not family bonding. Money. Again. I listened quietly while my parents explained how important this opportunity was, how family should support each other, how I was in a position to help. The irony was almost impressive. When I needed support, my accomplishments created problems. Now my accomplishments created opportunities for everyone except me. My father finally stopped talking. "So," I took a deep breath, then asked a simple question. "If my business had failed, would any of you have offered me money?" Silence. Long silence. The kind of silence that answers the question better than words ever could. Nobody responded, because we all knew the truth. No, they wouldn't have. They would have told me to work harder, be realistic, figure it out. Exactly the advice they had given me before. "I can't help," I said. My mother's disappointment was immediate. "Ethan, no." The conversation ended badly. For several days, texts arrived from various relatives. Some subtle, some direct, most carrying the same message. Family helps family. Eventually, I stopped responding because something had finally become clear. My family loved the idea of having a successful son. They just didn't love the process of helping one become successful. And there was a huge difference between those two things. A few months later, I received news that changed everything. My company had been selected for a major industry award. The event would include investors, executives, media coverage, and business leaders from across the country. It was easily the biggest moment of my career. And when the announcement became public, my parents reacted exactly the way I should have expected. For the first time in years, they desperately wanted to be involved. What I didn't realize was that they had already started making plans. Plans that involved showing up and taking credit for a success they never helped build. And this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The award announcement spread faster than I expected. Within a few days, industry blogs were writing about my company. Local newspapers picked up the story. Former classmates started reaching out. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly appearing in my messages. Most of it was positive. Some of it was overwhelming. But one thing became clear almost immediately. My parents were treating this achievement like it belonged to them. At first, it was small things. My mother shared every article she could find. My father started telling relatives about the sacrifices we made for Ethan. The word "we" appeared a lot. We encouraged him. We supported him. We always believed in him. Every time I saw those posts, I felt the same strange mixture of amusement and disappointment. Because none of it was true. Not entirely. They had fed me, clothed me, given me a home. I wasn't denying that, but building my future, that had been me. The scholarships, the late nights, the risks, the failures, the years of uncertainty. Those belonged to me. A week before the award ceremony, my mother called. She sounded unusually cheerful. "We already booked our hotel." I frowned. "What hotel?" "The one near the event." Silence. Then realization hit me. They were planning to attend. Not because I invited them, because they assumed they were invited. "Mom, what? I never sent tickets." Her enthusiasm disappeared immediately. "What do you mean? The event is private." Another pause, then she laughed awkwardly. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious." The laughter vanished. "You're not inviting us?" The question sounded genuinely shocked, as if the possibility had never occurred to her. I sat back in my chair. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question I had been carrying around for years. "Why would I?" That hurt her. I could hear it, but not as much as the truth hurt. "Because we're your parents." I closed my eyes. There it was again. The title, the relationship, the expectation. As though being my parents automatically entitled them to every important moment in my life. Even the moments they had done nothing to help create. "Mom, when I graduated high school, you canceled my celebration." Silence. "When I built my business, nobody cared until it became successful." Silence. "When you needed money for Lily, suddenly family mattered." Still silence. Finally, she spoke. "Are you still upset about that?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable, still upset. As if the problem was a single party, a single decision, a single moment. The graduation party had never been the real issue. It was what the party represented. Years of being second, years of being overlooked, years of being expected to understand while nobody tried to understand me. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not upset anymore." And that was true. Anger had disappeared years ago. What remained was clarity, the kind that changes relationships permanently. A few days later, my father called. His approach was different, more practical, less emotional. "We should move forward." I knew exactly what he meant. Forget the past. Pretend everything was fine. Return to normal. The problem was that normal had never worked for me. There is no moving forward without acknowledging what happened. His sigh told me everything. He wasn't interested in accountability. He wanted convenience. Those are very different things. The conversation ended quickly, and for the first time I stopped feeling guilty, because I realized something important. Healthy relationships require effort from both sides. You cannot spend years taking someone for granted and then expect immediate access to their success. Life doesn't work that way. Neither do people. The awards ceremony arrived on a Saturday evening. The venue was incredible, hundreds of guests, industry leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, journalists. The kind of room I used to dream about while working from a tiny apartment. As I walked inside, I felt proud, not because of the award itself, because of everything it represented, every sacrifice, every risk, every setback. Every time someone doubted me, I had earned my place there. Halfway through the evening, one of the event organizers approached me. "You have some guests asking for you." Immediately, I knew my parents. Sure enough, when I turned toward the entrance, there they were. My mother, my father, and Lily standing together trying to gain access. Somehow, despite everything, they had still shown up. I watched from a distance for several seconds. Part of me wasn't surprised. For years, boundaries had been optional in my family. If they wanted something, they simply pushed until someone gave in. The organizer looked uncomfortable. "Do you know them?" "Yes." "Would you like us to let them in?" The younger version of me would have said yes immediately. Avoid conflict, keep the peace, make everyone comfortable. The older version understood something different. Boundaries only work when you enforce them. "No." The organizer nodded. Simple as that. No argument, no drama, no speech, just no. A few minutes later, I saw my family leaving. My mother looked devastated. My father looked angry. Lily looked embarrassed. And for a brief moment, I felt sad. Not because I regretted the decision. Because things had reached this point at all. Because relationships aren't supposed to end up here. But actions have consequences. Choices accumulate. Years matter. You can't ignore someone repeatedly and then expect unlimited access when they become successful. That night, I accepted the award. I gave my speech, thanked my team, thanked my mentors, thanked the friends who supported me when success was still uncertain. And when I stepped off the stage, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Not because I had won an award. Because I had finally stopped carrying responsibility for everyone else's feelings. For the first time, I chose myself completely. I thought that would be the end of the story. I was wrong. Because the next morning, a video from the ceremony went viral. Thousands of people watched it, including my family. And suddenly everyone wanted to know why my parents weren't in the audience. The answer was about to become very public, and my parents were finally going to learn what it felt like when other people saw the truth. The morning after the awards ceremony, I woke up to dozens of notifications. Messages, emails, social media tags, missed calls. At first, I assumed people were reacting to the award itself. Then I started reading, and quickly realized something else had become the story. During my acceptance speech, I had thanked several people by name, my business partners. My mentors, my closest friends, the people who had helped me build my company. One clip in particular was being shared everywhere. Near the end of the speech, I said, "Success isn't built by the people who appear after you've made it. It's built by the people who stand beside you when success still looks impossible." It wasn't intended as a shot at anyone. It was simply true, but people interpreted it differently, especially after several attendees posted about my parents being turned away at the entrance. Suddenly, questions started appearing. Why weren't they invited? What happened? Was there a family dispute? I ignored most of it. The last thing I wanted was public drama. But apparently my parents felt differently. Because by that afternoon, my mother had posted a long message online. According to her version of events, they had been excluded unfairly. They had always supported me. They had sacrificed everything for me, and they couldn't understand why I was shutting them out. Reading it felt surreal, not because it was completely false, because it was missing every important detail. It was a version of reality where consequences didn't exist. A version where years of favoritism never happened. A version where my graduation party had never been canceled. A version where I was simply an ungrateful son. Normally, I would have stayed silent, but something happened that changed my mind. One of my former teachers commented publicly. She had attended my graduation celebration years earlier, and she remembered exactly why it existed. She politely mentioned that my original party had been canceled. Then another person commented. Then another, former classmates, family friends, neighbors, people who had been there, people who knew, people who remembered. Within hours, my mother's carefully crafted narrative started falling apart. Because the truth has an advantage over lies. You don't have to coordinate it. Everyone simply tells the same story. The comments weren't cruel. They were honest. And honesty was enough. For the first time, relatives began seeing the situation from my perspective. Phone calls started coming in. Some apologized. Others admitted they never knew the full story. A few confessed that they had always suspected favoritism, but hadn't realized how bad it was. One conversation stood out. It was with my aunt, someone who had defended my parents for years. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I think we failed you." That hit harder than I expected, not because it fixed anything, because it was the first genuine acknowledgement I'd received from family. Someone finally saw it. Someone finally admitted it. And strangely enough, that mattered. Meanwhile, things weren't going well for my parents. People weren't attacking them. But they were asking uncomfortable questions, questions that had never been asked before. Why was Lily always the priority? Why was Ethan expected to sacrifice everything? Why did every family event revolve around one child? Questions have a funny way of exposing patterns, especially patterns that have existed for years. Then something happened that nobody expected, including me. Lily called. I stared at my phone for nearly a minute before answering. We rarely spoke, and when we did, conversations usually lasted less than 5 minutes. "Hey," she said. "Hey," awkward silence. Then another. Finally she sighed. "I think we should talk." I honestly didn't know what to expect. An argument, an accusation, a demand. Instead, what happened surprised me. For the first time in our lives, Lily sounded tired, not angry, not defensive, just tired. "Do you know something weird?" she asked. "What?" "I never asked them to treat me that way." I didn't respond immediately, because I wasn't sure how to. She continued. "I mean, sometimes I did when I was younger." Another pause. "But after a while it just became normal." I understood exactly what she meant. The favoritism wasn't entirely her fault. She benefited from it, absolutely. But my parents created it, maintained it, protected it, for years. "I honestly thought you didn't care," she admitted. That made me laugh softly. "I cared." "Then why didn't you ever say anything?" The answer came instantly. "Because nobody listened." Silence, long silence. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "I'm sorry." 3 simple words. But unlike every conversation I'd had with my parents, they sounded real. No excuses, no justifications, no conditions, just sorry. I appreciated it, more than she probably realized. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. For the first time, we spoke honestly, about childhood, about family dynamics, about expectations, about the pressure both of us experienced in completely different ways. By the end of the call, we weren't suddenly best friends. Life isn't that neat, but we understood each other better, and that was enough. Ironically, Lily ended up recognizing the problem long before my parents did. Because my parents remained convinced they were victims. Every conversation eventually circled back to the same complaint. Why couldn't I let the past go? The answer never changed, because the issue wasn't the past. It was the refusal to acknowledge it. You can't heal something while pretending it never happened. Months passed. My company continued growing. The controversy faded. Life moved forward. And eventually, I received news that would become the biggest milestone of my career. A major acquisition offer. The kind that changes everything. The kind that turns years of work into generational wealth. The kind of success that people dream about. When the deal became public, my phone exploded. Congratulations arrived from everywhere. Friends, colleagues, mentors, relatives, even distant family members. And right on schedule, my parents called. Again. Only this time their tone wasn't pride. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't celebration. It was desperation, because they had finally realized something. The son they spent years overlooking no longer needed them. And there was nothing they could do about it. When news of the acquisition became public, my life changed almost overnight. Not in the dramatic movie star way people imagine. I still woke up in the same bed, still drank the same coffee, still worried about ordinary things. But for the first time in my life, I had complete freedom. Financial freedom, professional freedom, the freedom to choose what came next. The deal wasn't just successful, it was life-changing. Years of sacrifice had turned into something real, something permanent. And suddenly everyone wanted to be part of the story, including my parents, especially my parents. 3 days after the announcement, my father called again, then texted, then emailed. By the end of the day, I had 8 missed calls. The next morning, my mother tried, then Lily, then several relatives. It felt strangely familiar. Not because they missed me, because they needed something. Eventually, I agreed to meet them. Not because I expected reconciliation, because I wanted closure, real closure. The kind that doesn't leave unanswered questions behind. We met at a quiet restaurant halfway between our cities. When I arrived, they were already there. My mother looked older. My father looked tired. Even before anyone spoke, I could tell the past few years hadn't been easy. For the first few minutes, conversation stayed polite. Small talk, weather, travel, work. Nobody wanted to address the obvious. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We've made mistakes." I waited. For a second, I thought an actual apology might be coming. Then he added, "But families shouldn't stay divided forever." And just like that, the moment disappeared. Because even now, he couldn't simply acknowledge what happened. There always had to be a but, an explanation, a justification, a shortcut around accountability. My mother reached across the table. "We want things to go back to how they were." I almost smiled because that was impossible. Not difficult, impossible. The version of me who accepted being second had stopped existing years ago. The version of me who sacrificed everything to keep everyone happy had disappeared somewhere between my graduation party and my first apartment. There was no going back, only forward. "I don't think you understand," I said quietly. Neither of them spoke. "I already moved on." The words landed harder than I expected, because they were true. I wasn't carrying anger anymore. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't waiting for apologies. I had simply built a life elsewhere. A life that no longer revolved around earning their approval. My father looked genuinely confused. "What does that mean?" I leaned back. "It means I stopped waiting." The silence that followed felt heavy, not hostile, just honest. For years I had waited to matter equally, waited to be seen, waited to be celebrated. Waited for someone to notice how much effort I was putting into relationships that rarely gave anything back. Eventually, I stopped waiting, and once that happened, everything changed. My mother started crying, not loudly, just quietly. The kind of crying that comes from realizing something important too late. "We love you." I believed her. That was the strange part. I genuinely believed she loved me. The problem was that love isn't always enough. Not when it's buried beneath years of favoritism. Not when actions consistently contradict words. Not when someone only realizes your value after you've learned to live without them. "I know," I said, and I meant it. That answer seemed to surprise her. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she expected accusations. Maybe she expected a fight. Instead, she got the truth. I knew they loved me. I also knew they failed me. Both things could exist at the same time. For the next hour, we talked more honestly than we ever had before. No shouting, no blame, just honesty. My parents admitted things they had never admitted before, that they protected Lily too much. That they expected me to be understanding because I was responsible. That they assumed I would always forgive them. That they didn't realize how much resentment was building. Some of those admissions mattered. Others came too late. Eventually, my father asked the question I think he had wanted to ask from the beginning. "Can we fix this?" I thought about it carefully, then I answered truthfully. "Maybe." Hope immediately appeared on their faces, so I continued. But not by pretending the last decade didn't happen. The hope faded slightly. Not because I was being unfair, because rebuilding trust takes work, and work is much harder than apologies. When the meeting ended, we hugged. For the first time in years, it wasn't some magical movie ending. Nobody cried into each other's shoulders. Nobody declared everything healed. Life doesn't work that way. Relationships don't work that way. But it was peaceful. And sometimes peace is enough. Over the next 2 years, my contact with my parents remained limited. Not hostile, limited. We spoke occasionally, saw each other occasionally. But the relationship never returned to what it once was. And honestly, that was healthy, because the old relationship wasn't healthy. The new one had boundaries, respect. Distance when necessary. For the first time, it was built on reality instead of obligation. Meanwhile, my life kept growing. I invested, started new projects, traveled, built friendships. Eventually, I met someone incredible. Her name was Claire. She was smart, funny, independent, and completely uninterested in my money, which immediately made her different from half the people who suddenly appeared after the acquisition. We dated for 3 years, then got engaged, then married. The wedding was beautiful, small, intentional, filled with people who had actually been present throughout our lives, people who showed up before success, not after. As I stood during the reception giving a speech, I looked around the room. Marcus was there, my old professors. My mentors, friends who had supported me during the hardest years. Even Lily was there with her husband. Over time, our relationship had improved, not perfect, but real. My parents were there too, seated respectfully among the guests. Not at the center, not as heroes, simply as family, exactly where they belonged, and that's when something occurred to me. This wasn't karma, not really. Karma would have been watching them suffer, watching them lose everything, watching them experience the same pain they caused me. But that's not what happened. The real consequence was simpler. They missed it. They missed years of my life, years they could never get back, the first successes, the struggles, the victories, the moments that matter. While they were busy prioritizing one child, the other quietly built an entire future. And by the time they realized what they had lost, that future was already finished, already standing, already moving forward. Without them, later that night after most guests had left, I stepped outside and looked at the stars. Claire joined me a moment later. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled. Yeah, because I was. For the first time in my life, I genuinely was. The graduation party they canceled felt impossibly far away now, almost like another lifetime. And yet, in a strange way, it had given me everything. If they hadn't canceled it, maybe I would have kept chasing their approval. Maybe I would have spent years trying to earn something that should have been given freely. Maybe I would never have learned the lesson that changed my life. Your worth is not determined by the people who fail to see it. Sometimes the people who overlook you are simply standing too close to appreciate what you are becoming. So build anyway, grow anyway, celebrate yourself anyway. And if they only recognize your value after you've succeeded, keep moving forward, because the best revenge was never making them jealous. The best revenge was building a life so fulfilling that their approval stopped mattering at all. And that was exactly what I had done.